Jake Ciely with me now. He's a senior fantasy football writer at The Athletic and the host of the All In Football podcast, giving out great advice as managers are closing in on the playoffs. And speaking of playoffs, the New York Jets as a team right now are in the hunt in the AFC, and they made a quarterback switch this week from Zach Wilson to Mike White. And White stepped in on Sunday, and Jake, he played about as well as he could. Fantasy managers that might have picked him up, they're pretty happy.
They are pretty happy, and if you're really looking at what they're happy about, it's the wide receivers getting back to being relevant. We knew Garrett Wilson earlier this year when he was with Joe Flacco, a rookie for them, was in a top 20 conversation across the league, and he kind of fallen off with Zach Wilson at quarterback. But now the switch to Mike White has put him back into that conversation. Corey Davis, fringe of being relevant, and we can have hope for Elijah Moore that he comes back around in his second season. So pick up Elijah Moore. If people drop him, stash him on your bench. You don't start him off just that one game. But Garrett Wilson's definitively back into every single lineup out there.
Elijah Moore requested a trade at one point of this season, and his post game, I mean, he was totally riding a high with Mike White throwing him the ball.
Yes.
So totally different scenario there. All right, the top fantasy points getter this week, Raiders running back Josh Jacobs, over 300 all-purpose yards, 2 touchdowns. Just an insane game against the Seahawks. He had that long walk-off run in overtime. But he was a game-time decision this week and might be again this week, Jake. What do we do in a situation like this?
Unfortunately, a lot of people might have missed out on Josh Jacobs because here's the thing. You need to have backup plans in place, and if you don't, you can't really risk the zeros. So what I will say is because it's a 4 o'clock game this week, and if you have other players in these kind of conversations, whether it's a Sunday night, Monday night, 4 p.m. games, is have a backup plan so you can wait on that upside of Josh Jacobs, because a lot of people out there, if you didn't, you had to play somebody in the 1 o'clock game, and then you got maybe 10, 12 points, and you missed out on that huge score. So try to have backup plans in place during or later than those games, because you want that upside when it comes to somebody that's potentially a top 5, top 10 player, either at running back or wide receiver.
All right, managers, listen up. There you go. Have a plan B when it comes to a situation like that. Moving on now, and this one's personal for me because he's on my team, Texans rookie running back Dameon Pierce. Pretty consistent from week 2 or 3 until recently. Basically, I mean, a 0 the last couple weeks from him. Jake, what's going on? Has he hit that rookie wall?
I think that's part of the conversation people need to start having. I wouldn't say it's definitively there. He did hit his previous season high total from in college. That was way back in week 7, and he had good games after that. Maybe it's taken a little bit longer. You know well as anybody does. These players, sometimes rookies, the vast amount of games, the vast amount of practices, they do hit walls, and potentially, especially somebody at running back who's not only seeing touches every single week, but a career high that he passed weeks ago. So the matchup this week against the Cleveland Browns is your one last chance. It is one of the best matchups you could possibly find. Don't pull him out of your lineup just yet, but if he doesn't give you a top 20 performance this week, it might be time to just bench him.
He's actually been on my bench the last 2 weeks, so I've been happy about that because he hasn't.
You got lucky.
But I did get very lucky with that. So we'll see. I might heed your advice this week. Terry McLaurin has been up and down this season. 4 receptions in each of the Commanders' last 2 games, under 10 points. Is he in line for a bounce back this week? And also, rookie running back Brian Robinson finally had his breakout game this season.
Yeah, and he caught a touchdown pass, which has basically been Antonio Gibson's game. But I look at Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson, and Terry McLaurin, pretty much a staple across lineups going against the Giants. So, like, the Giants' run defense has been terrible all year, and now their secondary is in that same conversation just because of injuries. They lost their top corner. They lost backup corners and backup safeties. They're on third-string units, rookies that have just shown up after being injured earlier this year. So this is a matchup ripe for the picking. Yes, it's a division game, and we could always see division games end up being 13-10. But Heineke should be able to take advantage of what's out there for him, and he loves Terry McLaurin. You and I have talked many times before. So McLaurin, Brian Robinson, and Antonio Gibson should be able to take big advantage of this matchup this week.